Hey, this is Arden Zwelling from Sportsnet, and you are listening to The Walk Off with Scott and Adam.
Thrilled to be joined by today's guest, Toronto Blue Jays insider and Sportsnet analyst Arden Zwelling. Welcome to the Walk-Off, man. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Guys, what's going on? Finally, a Blue Jays podcast. Just
Yeah,
what people
right?
need. Not enough of these days.
Well, it's a good team to jump on board with for a podcast. So as long as we're working out the timing all right.
Yeah, it seems to be a popular thing these days. It's funny, man. I always tell people like Blue Jays fans are so spoiled. Like they have no idea. Could you imagine being a Tampa Bay Rays fan or something? The Blue Jays fans have multiple podcasts, so many outlets doing great work, so many good writers around the team, video content, social media content, everything you
Agreed.
could ever want. So Blue Jays
And
fans have
you're
it
one
pretty
of
good.
those guys, man. Before we even get into this, I did want to mention to you, like, big fan of your stuff. I just read your big read on Marcus Semien and him returning to Oakland for this series this week. Really enjoyed it. I love At the Letter. So yeah, great work and thank you.
No, thanks, man. Yeah, I'm glad you like that piece. The big reads are definitely, really a rewarding thing for me to do, and also like an incredibly time-consuming and difficult and stressful thing.
Yes, I can imagine. Do you still enjoy the writing side of things now that you probably do the video and audio side a lot more?
Yeah, no, I love the writing. It's like the only thing I'm actually good at. So, that's what I started doing in this
Yeah.
business. And obviously, you have to kind of do everything these days. But yeah, the writing
Yeah.
is really rewarding. Like it's hard and it sucks, and like everybody knows, right? Like I don't think anybody enjoys the process of writing, but when you come out with something that you're happy with, it is a nice feeling.
Right. It's like building a shed, right? Like, yeah, once the shed's built, it's great.
Yeah, no, yeah, yeah. I've never built a shed, but I'd assume it's something similar.
Me
But
neither. I'm
it's
not
it's
sure why that's the
That was
analogy I chose
weird.
there, but yeah.
it's
How
always nice
has
to hear that somebody read it.
yeah.
I try not to fall into this trap of nobody reads anything these days, right? Like I think a lot of people do read things, you just don't hear from them that often.
Yeah.
So it is nice to hear that you read it and enjoyed it.
How has this year been for you as an analyst? I can imagine you went from being on the road all the time to Zoom all the time.
Yeah, it's not just this year; it was last year too,
Yeah.
right? So it's been the last 14 months or so. So yeah, I'm used to it, right? It's just the
Yeah.
new normal is covering the team from my kitchen tables. So I'm like, I'm adapted.
Well, Adam and I are stand-up comics, so we're kind of in the same boat. Like I went from just touring the country regularly to doing shows online and or not at
That's
all.
a different thing, man. Like comedy is not meant to be done
Not
on
at
Zoom,
all.
It
right?
is
Like
not. I
it,
agree, Arden.
comedy is supposed to be done in a very small and cramped
Yes.
room, right? Because there is a real connection that occurs in that room during comedy. So, but,
Yeah.
I feel for these comedians as much as one can feel for a comedian who have to
Yeah.
do these Zoom shows or these drive-in shows because I just don't know how you create that connection with an audience.
Yeah, it's been weird. Social distancing in general is just not what you want in a comedy atmosphere.
No. But what I really wouldn't want is to have to like deliver packages for Amazon right now, or
Agreed.
be a healthcare
Yeah.
worker or
Oh,
something like
frontline
that.
workers,
So
all the respect to them. Absolutely.
our lives are pretty good, honestly. Like you'd have to really lack perspective to be like, oh, woe is me, sitting here in my kitchen table covering a baseball team, right? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I write about millionaire man babies
Yeah.
chasing a ball around a field in pajamas at the end of the day. So
Man babies we
Yeah.
love.
so yeah, I'm doing just fine, and I think you guys are
Absolutely.
too.
Yeah. That's right, man. So I know it's been a little bit of work getting you on the show here. You were actually supposed to come on Friday, and
I
then the
apologize.
Roberto Alomar news broke. So for a few reasons, we rescheduled. And obviously, I would love to hear your take on those happenings. But before we get into that, what is it like as a sports reporter when news like that breaks? Something that's probably considered bigger than the actual game, right? Like some real life implications in this whole thing. What happens on your end during this type of event? Like, what is your process when a story like this breaks?
Well, I mean, for me on that particular one, like Shy was handling it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was pretty, it wasn't that much for me really. But yeah, you do start, you start thinking about how you feel about it, right? And because you're gonna have to talk about it, obviously. And yeah, if something needs to be written on it, you're gonna start writing something. You're gonna start making calls, and there's gonna be avails on whatever the the issue might be. So it's exactly what you'd imagine. Like there's no magic or mystery to it. It's just like events transpire and news happens, and then you just have to kind of process it and figure out how you're gonna cover it.
Your process starts with seeing how busy Davidi is.
Well, I mean, like that one,
I'm
like
teasing.
Shy
I
broke
know.
the story,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So
he
he
did.
was
Yeah.
all over it, right? So he like had it before anyone did. So like that was his story, and he owned it, and he did a tremendous
He
job on
did.
it. He wrote a
Yeah.
really really strong piece on it that
On a
I
very
saw.
difficult subject, like, and when I say difficult subject, I just mean how beloved Robbie Alomar was by Blue Jays fans. And sometimes it's tough as a fan to disassociate the memories of that player and the actual person and the things that he's doing. So he did an excellent job of that, I thought.
Yeah, well, and two things can be true at once, right? Like it's
Yeah.
Robbie Alomar still hit the home run off Dennis Eckersley, right? And he still was, one of the more impactful on-field contributors to the Toronto Blue Jays as well. And also, he still has been, found by a third-party investigation to, that there are some very credible allegations of sexual harassment. Like
Yeah.
that can all be true. So and like that, I sort of like. I'm not pushing back against you, but I'm when you hear the things that like, oh, this is difficult for fans, this is hard for people with those memories, like, yeah, but the really difficult thing is being a victim of sexual harassment.
100%.
That's the
100%.
really
And I
hard
probably
thing here.
worded that wrong, but no, you're
Like I
right.
said,
Absolutely.
not pushing back on you. That just
No.
kind of like
The general
started
atmosphere.
in my head a little bit of like that's who you really need to have empathy for is like the victim in this scenario, and like not only her but like the countless women who have been victims of sexual harassment in baseball and haven't come forward and haven't seen results like this as a result of coming forward and reporting sexual harassment. So that's who I have empathy for. Like I think that the fan who doesn't feel that comfortable wearing the Robbie Alomar jersey anymore is probably going to be just fine.
Yeah, agreed. How big is it for baseball to have made the steps they did with this whole Roberto Alomar thing? The fact that they did put him on the ineligible list, the fact that the Jays are removing him from the level of excellence. This is, baseball gets a bad rep sometimes for being an old boys club because it has been. These are huge steps.
Yeah, no, they seem to have finally gotten one right, which is progress. Certainly, like it doesn't erase all the times that they haven't gotten
No,
it right,
yeah.
and all the times like you heard about the Mickey Callaway thing in Cleveland being the biggest open secret in the organization, right? And we've all heard, not just in baseball but in countless industries, stories of women coming forward with with allegations like these and them not being believed, or them being swept under the rug, or not being treated with the respect
Minimized, absolutely.
right. And in a way, like that is why the vast majority of women who are the victims of sexual harassment or even sexual assault do not come forward and do not speak about this and do not raise it at the workplace, right? Like that's another thing that I would push back against is the cancel culture folks who kind of think that it's easy for somebody to come forward with something like this. Like they aren't taking a massive risk professionally and personally by speaking up about something like this, that is something terrible like this that has happened to them. Like this is life changing coming forward, and there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty as to what the impacts are going to be of that on your life in the future when you raise something like this to your employer. So you kind of got at it, right? Like the actions that were taken kind of say it all. When you talk about a guy being put on the ineligible list, when you talk about the Blue Jays removing him from the level of excellence and essentially, just wiping his name from the organization's history, like there's no reason to do those things unless you had a very, very compelling reason to do so. Like there's no
especially one thing that stood out to me was I didn't even know that the MLB list of ineligible guys that they have on there's 6 of them. Like this is no small decision. You have to do something awful to make that list.
Yeah, and I wonder if maybe people just aren't that familiar with it, right? And
Yeah.
because like it isn't like the name of the list doesn't invoke feelings of like, oh, this person's done something really bad, right? Like ineligible list is just, it's kind of like blasé, but it's like that. This is the greatest action MLB can take
Yeah.
outside of legal action, but that's beyond the game, right? Like that is beyond the sport. MLB as an organization, this is the most consequential thing that they can do. This is the most damning thing that they can do, and they are doing this based on the findings of a third party, like of an independent investigation that occurred
Yeah.
outside of MLB. And to your point earlier, it's not like MLB has a great track record on these things. you know so that's another reason why I don't understand the cancel culture argument, because it's not like MLB has ever done like it's not like they've really come down very hard on individuals who have been accused of things like this
Yeah.
before. So for all those reasons, right? You think about it, Robbie Alomar's, his name's on concession stands at Rogers Center, right? Like there are boxes and boxes of unsold merchandise, and his face is on tickets. He's wrapped up in the T12 tournament. I mean, this is a lot of work that is going to be done to remove him from sort of the annals of Toronto Blue Jays history.
100%.
It's
That's a really
necessary,
good point. It is
and they're
necessary.
right to do it, but it's not like it's something that's done lightly, and it's not like
No.
it's something that's done to appease anyone. This is not the result of public pressure in any way. These are the findings of an independent investigation that found that Roberto Alomar committed misconduct in a fairly serious way.
And that's the thing, is I don't think if they had found, like, if there hadn't been strong evidence, if this third party hadn't come out and released what they released, which we're not sure exactly what it is yet, but it's obviously, again, it's obviously awful for them to take these sort of steps. Like, if I remember the Toronto Blue Jays in the dark days, right? Like 2002 to 2012, and the amount of Roberto Alomar days they had because they had nothing else to hang their hats on, or the amount of, like, remember the old days that they did. Like, it's not easy to just strike that from the record. And again, anyone who thinks the Jays didn't really vet this and like really do their due diligence before making this decision are insane.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, the world is changing for the better, and some people don't like that. I do. I think it's progress, and I'm glad that women are being heard now. Like, I'm glad that there was an independent investigation outside of MLB. It wasn't just MLB saying, okay, we'll look into this. Well, I mean, you're looking into a Hall of Famer, and you're looking into like somebody who was wrapped up in the history of your sport. Might be a little bit of bias going on there, right? So they got some people with no skin in the game to take a look at all of these facts. And I didn't like Robbie Alomar's statement on it at all. When
me neither.
Came out and said, yeah, I would like to have my side of events heard. Well, yeah, there was an investigation. Like, your side was heard in that independent investigation. Like, that was your opportunity to say what you believe has happened here. And like, very clearly, like, some very large organizations have determined that you did something wrong, and that they don't want to be associated with you anymore. So it just the cancel culture stuff just drives me nuts, man. Like, it's as much as it's even like it's highly questionable whether cancel culture is even a real thing, but as much as it even is a real thing, this is not an example.
No, it's not,
because there was no public outcry. There was no like social media campaign. There was like, these allegations were not made in an article or in an interview. Like, this was all handled internally.
This was the first anybody had really heard of anything.
Right? And none of us found out about it until the consequences were delivered. This is all handled privately and independently, and in the way that you would hope that it is handled.
Well, the truth is, you look at it and you're like, this would have been so easy for them to sweep under the carpet. It would have been.
And they've done it in the past, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure they have. All right, there's no easy segue to a happier conversation, but let's do that. And the Jays are on a 3-game winning streak, which a sweep of Atlanta.
Like it, does it?
No, it doesn't feel like
right?
it, but they had a heck of a weekend. I mean,
they just throttled the Braves, and it feels like the sky is falling.
Yeah. Well, it's the injuries, and I know every team's dealing with it, but man, this team keeps getting hit. Speaking of injuries, have you heard any updates on Alondra Kirk and George Springer?
No, the only thing we've heard about Alejandro Kirk is from Charlie Montoyo basically saying he saw him walking, which yeah,
Yeah.
okay, great. I don't know. It's even tough. Like some of the official injury reports we get from the club this year. It's I take a lot of them with a lot of skepticism because sometimes what actually happens after that doesn't really line up with what we've been told. The club is like strictly controlling the flow of information this year with us not there on the ground, not around the team. We're not in the clubhouse. We're not talking to players at the same rate that we would be. And we're not even just like able to observe little things like, that guy is, here who, maybe would not be here if he wasn't here to cover for an injury or something like that, right? Like you're just not able to get that level of information this year. It's been a bit harder to do the job like that. So you take what the club gives you, but you also take it with a grain of salt as well.
And it gets a little frustrating. I'm sure it's frustrating on your end with that. I know on Blue Jays Twitter, fans are losing their mind over this, especially with George Springer being pulled out yesterday night and then the report being his legs were tired. Where are you on that? Was that just a precautionary thing? Like, do you think, I know you're probably up, you're not sure either, but does it look like George is going to be in the lineup again tonight?
I wouldn't be surprised if he was the designated hitter on Monday night. I think that people don't necessarily understand what the word fatigue means in a sports science sense, right? Like it's not just I need a cup of coffee. I was up kind of late the night before. Like this is muscle fatigue, right?
Yeah.
So anybody who has lifted weights or been through been on a hypertrophy program or anything like that understands what muscle fatigue is, and as little as clubs know about how to predict injuries and how to prevent them, which it is a very big guessing game, even in sports science. It's very much an emerging, practice of how to actually prevent injuries. People assume that you can just do that. You can't. It's highly subjective. But one thing that we do know about when injuries occur is when players are fatigued. And when you aren't able to put your body in the athletic positions necessary to, handle the very demanding rigors of playing sports at the highest level, and also perform highly technical, extremely explosive actions like hitting a baseball 470 feet, as George Springer did the other night, or busting it up the first base line in 3.5 seconds, right? I know on TV it looks slow, but it's highly explosive and extremely physical at field level. So when you are fatigued, it has been demonstrated again and again that you are at a heightened risk of injury. So if George Springer is 3 plate appearances into a ball game, he's maybe got one more, and he is feeling fatigue, and there's a potential he's going to put himself in a position athletically to get worse and to hurt an injury he's already carrying even more. I think the sensible thing is to pull him from that game, and I don't think it would be that much of a surprise to see that he is recovered enough 24 hours later to be back in the lineup.
It's interesting to watch sometimes the pushback of fans with George Springer lately, and it's really interesting to me because everyone was so excited when he got signed, and I think it's just he's been injured and fans are getting impatient with getting to see him, and there's been all this excitement the last 3 games, and he put up 2 home runs 2 days ago, and it was just it's just like this morning I was on Twitter and I'm like, I can't believe some of the stuff, the vitriol I'm reading towards George Springer. But like you put it, he's coming off injury and fatigue happens.
Yeah, and he's a 31, 32-year-old outfielder. This is what that looks like in MLB, right? When you're dealing with guys who have a lot of mileage on the odometer and who are getting up there and are playing a very, demanding defensive position and also swing the bat hella hard, and are coming off of a couple soft tissue injuries. Don't forget about the oblique issue.
Yeah.
And also, George Springer is just an interesting case in that he went through spring training with that oblique issue and was playing and hitting home runs. And then one day just kind of said, oh yeah, my abdominal's kind of tight. And they sent him for an MRI. And they're like, dude, you have a grade 2 oblique sprain, or strain. And he was like, oh, word? Do I? Right?
Yeah.
Like he clearly has a very high pain tolerance and pain threshold. He'll clearly play through a lot of things. And look, if this was September and we were in a postseason push, completely different situation, right? But we're not. It's May 3rd. We're not even 20% of the way into the season. So like the decisions you make right now are about George Springer being as healthy and effective and strong as possible come September, and the Blue Jays hope October. If the cost of that is one plate appearance in a game that you're winning anyway on a Sunday in early May, I mean, you'll pay that cost, right?
Yeah.
You'll pay that price if the return is going to come later. But if you're going to put him in a position in that game where he might hurt himself more and he might be lost for more of the season, that's a problem. And people would be outraged about that as well if he was,
of
playing
course,
less than 100% and that happened. So it's a fine balance, right? Because there's a lot of, like I said, the subjective measures of George Springer and what he's feeling, what he's telling them. There's the objective measures of what the Blue Jays are seeing in terms of his power and his strength, not only on the field and in games with like exit velocities, but outside of games. I promise you, they are testing this guy every day in the gym and testing his strength, his grip strength, and his explosiveness and the force that he can generate. That's how teams try to kind of manage workloads these days. So, if it was September, it would be a different conversation, but it's May, so caution rules the day.
Which makes all the sense in the world. So pitching has been incredible for this team this year. Big surprise to everyone, but it has been mind-blowing. I can't remember a bullpen in baseball that has had such a next man up workout for them like it has the Jays this year. It's been absolutely mind-blowing to watch. However, the cupboard is getting pretty thin. It's getting pretty bare. Steven Matz tonight, Anthony Kay tomorrow, Robbie Ray, and then hopefully Hyun Jin Ryu. Fingers crossed, right? How long can the Jays continue to limp through their starting rotation injuries? Like, how close are they to maybe bringing on an Anibal Sanchez or looking outside of the organization?
Yeah, I don't know. If you had asked me that question 3 weeks ago, I don't know if I would have told you they were going to make it to early May, right? And here they are. They've been one of the best run prevention teams in baseball. Like you said, the pitching has been spectacular, just as we all assumed coming into the season. And they have had these, performances from individuals that you weren't necessarily expecting them from. Tommy Milone has thrown the 4th most innings on this team.
Wow.
Think about that.
I did not know that.
Signed towards the end of spring training, whose fastball tops out at 84. Lefty pitching bulk relief out of the bullpen is like eating innings for this club. You look at what they got out of Joel Payamps, who, a few months ago, it was like, what is going on with the Blue Jays and the Red Sox and this guy?
Yeah, right.
what is this weird, like, waiver wire tug of war? And now here he is, and he's been like really good for the Blue Jays out of the bullpen. Trent Thornton, bullpen weapon for the Blue Jays, right? It's just, it's been a lot.
Anthony Castro, Tim Meza, like literally.
Anthony Castro, who came off of waivers from the Detroit Tigers, came into spring and struck everybody out. And then all of a sudden he's like pitching leverage in the big leagues. It's unbelievable. Like Tigers fans must be beside themselves. This guy got away on waivers. That's a rebuilding ball club. They could use a guy like Anthony Castro. So it's also unpredictable and uncertain, I guess. So I'm like hesitant to try to say, oh, they can make it this long, or they just got to wait until Nate Pearson's healthy enough to come back or whatever. But what I do know is that they had the benefit of several off days towards the end of April, and they do not have that benefit in May. They're playing 29 games in 31 days, so it's going to be taxing, and it's going to be interesting just to watch how this pitching staff can hold up. It's probably unlikely that they continue to pitch as well as they have, but if the offense is going to come around like the way it did in the Atlanta series, then you can take a little hit.
You've got some breathing room for sure.
Run prevention, because you're just scoring more runs, and that's why the Blue Jays lost the majority of their games in April, because they weren't scoring enough runs. So if they start hitting the way they were built to hit, I think you will be okay if some of these pitchers take a step back.
Agreed. Okay. So let's talk patience here for a second. It's one of my least favorite attributes as a fan, but something that time and time again proves to be valuable. Vladdy is a prime example for this of anyone who needs it. And one of the most exciting things about this Blue Jays organization, in my opinion, anyways, is it's not necessarily just the young core that has kind of come up together. It's the fact that this organization has layers of those guys throughout their affiliates. And it's really easy as a fan to get super excited about these young guys that are coming up, right? I know there's been a ton of fanfare for guys like Adam Kloffenstein, who's starting with the Vancouver Canadians, Simeon Woods Richardson in Double-A this year. Tons of people loving him. And of course, Alek Manoah, who is a household name amongst Blue Jays fans and hasn't even played on the big club yet. So despite fan enthusiasm, the chances of these guys being seen on this roster at any point in 2021 seems pretty unlikely. Where are you on when we might see those three guys? And why is it so important to not rush a guy like Alek Manoah, whose professional pitching experience is very limited?
Well, so the Manoah placement at AAA was interesting to me, because it's not like you've given him any room to advance a level in the minors if things are going really, really well. If things are going really, really well, there's only one place for him to go, and that is to the majors. So that sort of indicated to me that there's actually a pretty good chance he could make his major league debut this year. And sometimes like I think that just because without the minor league season last year, we kind of forgot that this is a college guy who, look, if he had a full minor league season last year, maybe he's actually on the Blue Jays today, right? Because he's advanced, right? And he's a guy who pitched a ton of innings in his final year in college. And he's a guy who, like I've said for a long time, could get hitters out in the big leagues today. Like he has two like above average big league weapons in his fastball and slider. If you put him in the Blue Jays bullpen today, I promise you he could get high leverage
For
outs for
sure.
you against some of the best hitters in baseball. I have no doubt of that. The thing is, the Blue Jays want him to be more. They want him to be a starter, and they want him to round out his repertoire, continue to develop that changeup, learn how to attack an order once, twice, maybe halfway through the third time. They want to learn him to learn how to like get up and down 5 and 6 times in an outing, right? So as useful as Alek Manoah could be as a reliever today, he'll be really useful if he's a very good starter tomorrow and into the future. So that kind of gets back to the patience things that you're talking about. So it's always this push pull, right, with development and winning. And I think right now with Alek Manoah, you prioritize the development. But look, if it's late August, September, and you need a bullpen arm and you're in a postseason race, or you're thinking like, hey, we might be able to like win an AL East title here, all of a sudden those scales shift and development gets lessened, and win now like becomes more of a priority. And you say, okay, maybe we will sacrifice like a couple minor league starts of Alek Manoah's development to get him to the big leagues, throwing gas out of our bullpen and helping us reach the postseason.
Do you think that's the most likely scenario in which we see Alek Manoah as maybe a late August, September call up in the bullpen? Do you see him starting for this team at all in 2021?
I think so. I mean, things would have to go really awry, but there is like kind of a layer of depth there that they would go to before they were forced to be like Alek Manoah starts in the big leagues now. And you think about guys like TJ Zoik, we already saw this year, Joey Murray, who is a guy who doesn't get talked about, a whole lot, but like he's a guy on the come up in the organization who has like been fantastic with a high spin fastball. I think he would probably get an opportunity first. There's like
this was actually my next question was under the radar guys, and I had Joey Murray written down. He was actually on the show with us, so we're a little biased, but great kid, and like you said, exceptional spin rate, and it just looks like it would play. I know he's recovering from a little bit of a tweak or something like that at the alternate site, but he's going to AAA too. Is he a guy you just mentioned it? You see him a little bit ahead of a Manoah for a call up?
If the Blue Jays need a starter next month, I mean, like Murray just has more of a minor league track record.
Yeah.
And I think the Blue Jays really want Alek Manoah just to get some minor league innings, just to get some experience as a starter. So if it's early in the season, like I still think like the development of Alek Manoah is going to very much be prioritized. But I don't know where the threshold is, if it's like the All-Star break, if it's August 1st or whatever, but there will be a time where things turn a little bit And depending on where the Blue Jays are in the standings and what their needs are at the big league level, you could see some guys like coming up to the big leagues who you wouldn't have necessarily expected. Man, like if we were sitting here last July and like, is Alejandro Kirk going to be taking, at bats in the big leagues? We would have said, no way. The guys have played above high A, right? But he went to the alt site and proved himself. And most importantly, the Blue Jays had a glaring need in the big leagues because Reese McGuire was not getting it done at the time. And Danny Jansen was slumping as well. So Alejandro Kirk came up and tore the cover off the ball, came back to spring training the following year and won a job on the team. Like we're already seeing some of those little meritocratic moves, right? Think about how desperate this team is for innings right now and for pitching, and Tanner Roark gets DFA'd. Think about Shun Yamaguchi, who the club like gave a 2-year deal to. In his first season, like was pitching out of the bullpen in an unfamiliar role, and they're throwing him into those 10th inning spots. He's getting used to the ball and like all kinds of stuff. You had every reason to write off 2020 for him and say, hey, maybe this guy can be better in 2021. Blue Jays cut bait and they owed him money. Same thing with Tanner Roark. Owe him a bunch of money and cut bait because you were seeing some more meritocratic maneuvering here, which is an indication that the win now.
That winning matters.
You know what I mean? Like that those scales are tipping a little bit. But it's one thing with, a Tanner Roark or Shun Yamaguchi. It's another with like one of your top pitching prospects who you want to like build a base of innings and you want to be like a front of the rotation starter for you for years to come. So it's like every decision like that has a million layers that go into it. But yeah, like I do think there's a very real scenario that Alek Manoah is in the big leagues this year.
It's likely that, or maybe not likely, but there's a possibility of someone we weren't expecting grabbing this 5th spot in the rotation and running with it, isn't there?
Sure. I mean, I don't know how much the Blue Jays even have a rotation. Right?
Yeah.
It's kind of day to day.
How's your arm feeling? Get in there.
Right. I don't know how much, like, I don't even think about it in terms of like rotation and bullpen anymore. Cause I just think about it like as the staff, right? The staff as a whole. Cause I think we're going to see more openers. Like we've seen, we're going to see more games where Travis Bergen is opening in front of a Tommy Malone, or Trent Thornton might, be getting some starts here and there. Right. Like I think we're going to see TJ Zwick again. We're going to see Anthony Kay this week. And like, man, Anthony Kay was hard done by in his last outing.
Wasn't he?
Well. And it's really batted ball luck, some plays not made behind him. Like he's a guy who, is going to be getting some outings. So like, I don't even really think about it as like, the Blue Jays have 5 starters and this is who they are and this is how it's going to go. It's really going to be just like a constant assessment of like, what's our need in the big leagues? Who are we facing? Like what type of lineup are we coming up against? Who's effective right now? Who's healthy? Who needs a blow? Where's Hyun Jin Ryu at? Like, how's his glute? How much more time does he need between outings? It's going to be just like a constant assessment of that. And I just think this, quote unquote rotation is just going to be like a 3 to 4 day horizon scenario for probably the rest of the season.
It's interesting. It's not sexy, but this is kind of where baseball's going, right? It's less of a rotation and more of a pitching staff as a whole.
100%. Yeah. This is, and teams have just kind of figured out that like, this is how you maximize your weapons, right? And like, there's a whole bunch of things wrapped up in it, right? There's how hard guys are throwing these days and the effort with which guys are pitching, like Robbie Ray and the effort that he pitches with is not really going to be sustainable over 9 innings unless he's being really efficient. Like I just don't think you're going to see any like 120 pitch outings from Robbie Ray or from any pitcher in baseball ever again, really. So I think that's wrapped up in it. And then, also just the teams have figured out that like, instead of throwing that like really mediocre starter who would be like your 4th or 5th guy, but you throw him out there just to eat innings and he allows 4 or 5 runs and puts you in a hole. Instead of throwing that guy, you could just throw like 2 or 3 relievers and maybe like allow fewer runs. And after the game, you're just going to be optioning someone and calling someone else up anyway, right? So you're really maximizing your 40-man roster and you're using those optionable guys, and you're having a bit more of a revolving door in the bullpen, and maybe you can get some better results that way. So there's the third time through penalty is wrapped up in this. There's a lot of things wrapped up in it, but it is more of a pitching staff as a whole and the totality approach than just these are our starters, these are our relievers.
And you just touched on it, but wow, has the 40-man roster ever become a much bigger deal than it was even 3 years ago? Like, it's been really crazy to watch teams, just guys are moving up and down from that 40-man. Anyone with options, you're going to see moving.
Yeah, and I mean the Rays kind of started that, 4 or 5 years ago. Like they were pretty early on that trend, and there are things wrapped up in that as well, in that the Rays don't pay guys, right? And don't typically have many.
Oh, the Rays
veterans.
are to blame for almost everything that everyone doesn't like about baseball, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Many of the innovations that are also ruining the game. So the Rays in not paying anybody and in never having veterans on their roster and constantly having like 0 to 3 service time dudes who like have options remaining were able to do that and run rosters like that. And I think other clubs saw that and thought, like we could do that too. And not only maybe like get better results, but also probably decrease our expenditure a little bit in terms of payroll. Everybody wins except for the athlete.
Well, I mean, you saw it with Rich Hill and Chris Archer. Like when Charlie Morton and Blake Snell left the Rays, and you watched them trade their 2 best pitchers that were under contract for $26 million combined. I was just like, there's no better deal for pitchers than that. Like, what are you doing? And then you watch them bring in 2 guys for $8 million, and it's working. It's fine. I don't know if the Rays would be any better off right now with Snell and Morton.
No, and the Rays are, one of the best organizations in baseball at like finding cheap wins, right? And that's just that's been their ethos, because they don't spend on payroll. It's a lot simpler if you're just the Dodgers and you just spend all the money, right?
Yeah.
And you just run a $200 million payroll. And if you've already got an amazing pitching staff and Trevor Bauer's on the market and you got, $30 million a year to spend, just go get him. Like, he's really, really good.
Put David Price in the bullpen, whatever.
Right. But the other thing that, the Dodgers do really well that makes them unfair is like they draft and develop really, really well. Like, and the Rays have long done that, to an excellent degree, and the Dodgers do that really, really well too. So the Dodgers are layering in that drafting and developing, that finding gems on the international market, the homegrown talent that is constantly like refreshing their big league roster, over time, sustainably, combining that with really big free agent spending and going out and getting a Mookie Betts and extending him and things like that. Like, that's what makes them kind of the model organization in baseball.
Speaking of organizational depth, is there any under the radar prospects that don't have the same sort of fanfare as Austin Martin or Jordan Groshans, but could be contributing members to this team in a year or two that stand out in your mind?
Yeah, you mentioned Joey Murray, and he's like he's a name that comes up a lot. And you guys talk to him, obviously, so you kind of learn just how bright he is, right? How keen.
Yeah.
And he's a guy who like really dives into kind of the data and the developmental side of things. Like the Blue Jays, like development folks like him a lot, just because he's very open-minded.
Yeah.
He's very willing to try different things, and to he's going to do everything he can to maximize what he does as an athlete. And like, he's not a guy who rolls out of bed throwing 98, right?
That was one thing that stood out to me when we talked to him, was how excited he was that he had ramped up his fastball to 93, 94. Because he was saying, he's like, I was getting outs in 2019 with 89. And he's like, it's been such a weapon to add that extra 4 miles an hour. And just to see how his brain processed it, right? Where he was like, now that I got a little bit more juice, he was talking about now we can get guys out up in the zone more. He's like, so now I've started pitching way more up in the zone. And, with the spin rate and it looking like his spin rate just makes it such a deadly weapon to watch. Like, I'm excited about Joey Murray too, I guess. I'm rambling here, but
no, he led the organization in strikeouts a couple years ago, throwing an 89 mile an hour fastball.
Yeah, it's crazy.
More than 70% of the time. Like, he threw it all. It's not like he has a great breaking ball, but it's not like he was, relying on it, an overwhelming amount. He was actually just throwing fastballs all the time. And because of that spin rate, the ball, like, no ball actually rises. Like, that's just not how gravity works. But the ball appears and is perceived by the hitter to drop less, right? So hitters are used to kind of swinging under a ball, right? Because you think about a pitcher from the mound, it's kind of coming on that downward plane at you. So you kind of like swing under the release point of it. But with all that spin, it fights gravity just enough, like just a little bit more, that it doesn't drop as much as a hitter thinks it would. And that's why Joey Murray gets like all the like swing and miss under his stuff, because it's, hitters just aren't accustomed to a ball behaving in that way. And look, that's the sort of thing that big league hitters will probably figure out at a certain point. He's going to have to,
there'll be adjustments for sure.
Rely more on secondary stuff, right? And he's going to have to find different ways to kind of set that pitch up. I don't know if he can keep throwing it as much as he did in that year in the minors and have success at the highest level. But like, that's why I think the Blue Jays are excited about him, is because he will find those ways, right? And because he has like dramatically improved his breaking stuff as well, like, and that's where, a high spin rate is going to really help you as well, is on a curveball, is on a pitch that spins. So, he's going to find those different ways to attack hitters and work his way through an order and give hitters different looks and be unpredictable and, sequence. Think about Hyun Jin Ryu, right? Doesn't throw hard at all.
I was just going to bring that up. Yeah.
A good day is 91, isn't it? Like, it's not overpowering stuff, but he's unpredictable. Like, you see, how often do you see like Hyun Jin Ryu on the mound shaking constantly? Because even Dane Jansen doesn't even know what the guy wants. Dane Jansen's been working with them for 2 years now, and even he's like, man, what do you want to throw here? That's how unpredictable Hyun Jin Ryu
it would get frustrating as a catcher, right? By like the 5th or 6th pitch that you put down, and you're like, we're running out of pitches here. Like, I know you have 8 of them, but
yeah, well, that's the thing, right? Like, he throws 5 of them, and he'll throw them all over the zone to all quadrants. His command is so good when he's on that he can place it exactly where he wants to, that there are actually a lot of options, right? Because it's 5 pitches times all the quadrants of the zone. So, there are actually a lot of and it's any pitch in any count as well, is the thing. So it's just a very uncomfortable day as a hitter. And you think about it, like, you only have to move the ball just a little bit off that sweet spot of the bat to get the weak contact that Hyun Jin Ryu is after. He can strike dudes out, obviously, but like when he's really at his best and he's generating weak contact, ground balls, pop-ups, you just got to move it off that barrel just a little bit, and you get that weak contact and you have a good defense behind you, you're going to be making outs.
How big do you think it is for this organization to have a guy like Ryu, for the pitchers in the organization that aren't maybe velocity orientated, and to kind of watch a guy who can do it with 91 and just being able to move the ball up and down and side to side and throw his pitches where he'd like?
Yeah, it's cool to see, right? It's cool to see I know he's not having a great year, but the Kyle Hendrickses of this world, right? And, in prior years, he was spectacular.
Absolutely.
With underwhelming stuff, having some trouble with home runs this year. It's seeing what Marco Estrada was able to do with a pretty soft fastball and a changeup, essentially, right? Seeing what Jay Happ has been able to do with, like, he's, low 90s, but it's not overpowering, and he throws fastballs all the time. Even like David Phelps is a bit of an example of this. Guy throws a ton of fastballs, but throws one flat, throws one that sinks, throws one that cuts. Sometimes that's all you need, right? Especially in short bursts, as a David Phelps. If you can locate and you're only facing 4 or 5 hitters, I mean, you can get by with that and you can survive with that. So, there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat. Obviously, velocity helps. Like, any pitcher will tell you, they would like to have velocity. They would like to throw
Of course.
104, like Nate Pearson. And even like, it's always funny talking to hitters. And it's, you kind of ask them, like, what's really the difference between, 95 and 98? But I think it is a big difference.
It's a huge difference, of course.
When you're standing in that box, like, you really do notice. Like, the ball gets on you really fast.
Well, I remember watching that documentary Fastball. I don't know if you've seen it, but they pretty much document the beginning of fastball, the fastball since like the 20s all the way to now, and Araldis throwing 105. And there's a scene in the movie where they asked Derek Jeter what the difference is between 92 miles an hour and 100. And he burst out laughing and he went, a home run? It is a good point of like a few extra miles makes a big difference.
Well, you think on just an average fastball, whatever that is these days, 92, 93, 94, as a hitter, you have, I think, 0.4 seconds to react, essentially, right? Like, so you have like less than half a second to react. So any like increase in velocity is just going to shave time, like reaction time, off of that. And that matters when you're dealing with such thin margins. So when you're dealing with such little time to react as a hitter, like you just gotta, be a bit more jumpy, a bit more quick twitch. Maybe it gets you out of your rhythm a little bit, right? Like that's what's so impressive about Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is that he's pitched so carefully, and he nobody wants to give this guy a pitch to hit, especially right now because he's on such a tear.
Yeah.
And he has been so exceptional about recognizing what pitchers are doing to him and about not getting out of his approach and staying disciplined and taking his walks and not getting jumpy at the plate and just staying in what he's doing. Like for a 22-year-old, that's impressive, like veteran stuff. And that's a big reason why he's having the success that he is right now, because he's just staying within himself. So that's what's really impressive about him. That's what's kind of the separator for the really elite hitters. Is they don't get out of what makes them best at the plate.
Has Vladdy ever proved that he is every bit the talent that he was touted to be? And everyone's noticing. I mean, my God, he was in People magazine a few days ago. Like he's becoming that star in the MLB. If Vlad continues to dominate, do you think there's any possibility that this front office throws him a big bag of money attached with a long-term contract?
I mean, I think they'd like to. Vlad would have to sign it.
Yeah, of course.
I don't know
of course.
what his incentive is to sign a deal like that right now, right? Like any kind of extension at this point in his career would be about the two sides kind of sharing risk, right? The Vlad, the risk that like, well, hey, maybe, by the time I would have reached free agency, I'll actually still be really good. I'll be even better than I am now, and I'll be in line for $300 million. The risk on the Blue Jays side being that he gets hurt, right?
Yeah,
so
the Acuna contract's not going to be out there anymore.
Yeah, I mean the Acuna, like, that's the other thing, right? Like Acuna, I don't know the man, but like I would assume more humble upbringing than Vladimir Guerrero Jr., right?
That's a really good point.
I think he was kind of incentivized to like take the big bunch of money that was in front of him, even though that deal is like unbelievably team friendly.
It's infuriating.
But I think that he was at a point in his life where I don't know that he'd ever, had an amount of money that it would even approach that, right? And he was just like, look, I could be set for life and I can do this. Vladimir Guerrero Jr., his dad's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, he's already been set for life since he was born. Yeah.
Right? This applies to Bo Bichette as well. Dad made some money, right?
Yeah.
And dad was pretty good. So those guys don't have the incentive of putting a bunch of money in front of them and being like, how do I turn this down? I've never seen this amount of money ever in my life. Like those guys can go year to year a lot more easily. I think that's why it's going to be hard to get extensions done with those guys, because it's just going to be hard to find that middle ground of risk between the two sides.
They may need to wait right until free agency is my guess then, right?
I don't know. Like they've just got here, so like let's just let them.
Yeah, you're right. Let's enjoy this. You're right.
I haven't started to think about their exits from Toronto just yet. They just got here.
Fans, I'm the worst. Thank you so much for joining us, Arden. Really appreciate the time. Do you have a few more minutes? We've got some listener questions here for you if you can stick around for.
Happy to.
Okay,
please.
Sounds good. Awesome. So this first one is from Trent in Kelowna, BC. He says, hey, Arden, who is the best player in the game right now, in your opinion? It's Mike Trout, right? Don't let me down.
Yeah, it's obviously
Trout. Right?
The crazy thing is this year is like better Trout than the Trout we've seen before, who was already like the best player on the planet. So he is like improved on, the standard by which all other players are measured, which is pretty incredible that he is.
Isn't
you think
it?
about every game plan is based around Mike Trout, right? Like every pitcher is thinking about how do I get Mike Trout out? So like this guy is facing the stiffest competition and, better and better game plans against him, and he's staying ahead of it. It's unbelievable. But, I will say like the most fascinating player to watch is Shohei Ohtani.
Isn't he?
That's the most interesting player. But if you want to talk about, just best player in the world, it's Mike Trout. Obviously, he might be the best player of all time.
I agree
And he
with
plays
that.
every night, and people don't appreciate it. And people
I know.
don't like people who, are like, oh man, I wish I was around when Barry Bonds was,
Yeah.
going nuts every night, or like
It's
Lou
like you
Gehrig.
are.
It's happening right now on your phone every single night on the West Coast. Pull up MLB TV, after 10 o'clock and watch the Angels, because you're watching one of the best to ever play the game every single night.
I mean, I don't wish to see the Angels beat the Jays out for a wild card or anything in the playoffs, but my goodness, it would be nice to see the Angels put Ohtani and Mike Trout to good use while they're in their prime there. Like,
Yeah, no, that's been the big crime of his career, is that he's spent so little time on the biggest stage in the postseason. You think about the talent that guy is. So, especially this year, right? Like if you had him, Rendon, who people forget about,
Yeah.
Ohtani. If you had Albert Pujols in the playoffs in his final year, like that'd be kind of cool to see.
It would be so cool.
Can you imagine Shohei Ohtani like playing both ways in October? It would be appointment viewing. It's already appointment viewing, but like it would be really cool to see him do it on that stage. So I'm with you. I hope the Angels go to the postseason.
Yeah. Okay, so Devin in Moncton, New Brunswick says, "Hey Arden, super cool you're on the show. Do you know how long Thomas Hatch is going to be out, and how high is that kid's ceiling?"
I don't know how long he's going to be out, but I do know the Blue Jays are being pretty cautious with it. And if you remember back to the injury and to what actually happened, like it looked pretty bad. So I can understand why they're being cautious with them. And he has a little bit of a history of elbow issues as well from back in the day with the Cubs. So, I think they're just going to be very cautious with that one. And like clearly they are not going the surgical route right now, so they don't believe that it's a situation where he needs to have like a UCL reconstruction or something. So clearly they believe he can get back on a mound and be effective, but exactly when that happens is going to depend on his recovery and how he's feeling. And with an injury like his, I don't see the Blue Jays rushing that at all. But yeah, I think he could be really good. You mentioned the ceiling, like when a guy throws as hard as he does with some of the off-speed stuff he does, he has, and the approach that he has as well, and just kind of the demeanor, the coolness and the calmness and the poise on the mound, that's a pretty good bag to be carrying out there with you every day. You can really build on that.
Do you see him as a starter, or do you think they move him to the bullpen?
I see him as a starter as long as he can be durable, right? As long as he can hold up to the workload. Like I saw Ryan Baraki as a starter. I think just the workload and the durability just wasn't quite there, obviously. And now he's a lights out reliever, right? So you always exhaust the option as a starter, and see if a guy can hold up and can be a starting pitcher. Not only, it's not only good for the organization, it's good for the player. You get paid a lot more as a starter, going through arbitration and into free agency. So everybody's incentivized to be a starting pitcher. But I think that the biggest separator between the guys like, Scherzer and Verlander's not a great example because he's hurt, but for a lot of years it was Verlander, and Greinke and Ryu. It's just durability. It's just being able to take the ball every 5 and being able to log a high workload and a ton of innings. It's a hard thing to do. And, for some guys, they just individually do not have it in them to withstand that toll.
So Isaac in Edmonton says, during your time covering the Blue Jays, which big fish free agent or big trade almost happened and didn't? And were the Jays ever close on Trevor Bauer, in your opinion? Which I doubt it.
Votto. I mean, that would be, there were Votto discussions. Lindor. It's another one. People probably don't realize how close the Lindor thing got. Not even just this past offseason when the Blue Jays were right there, but 2 off seasons ago when Cleveland didn't trade him when everyone thought they were going to.
Right.
I have reason to believe the Blue Jays made the best offer at that time, and Cleveland just didn't take it. And they didn't trade Francisco Lindor here. But yeah, that's the most recent one. And then Votto, in 2015, Ben Zobrist was like Alex wanted to go out and get Zobrist and just couldn't do it. So there's been a few.
That's fun. I didn't know any of that. That's great.
Yeah, Lindor thing. The Lindor rumors were pretty.
The
widespread.
Lindor rumors were out there. I just didn't see them as that close. But that's great. Yeah,
he's having a miserable start to the year. Because I was watching that game on Sunday night, that insane game, and he came up to the plate and his OPS was like 500. What?
I don't know. I don't think there's any way he doesn't find it, but
no, he's
I think it's the $300 million that would put on his lap, and he's pushing, right? Like
I just hadn't even been paying attention to that, so I don't know if like Mets fans are apoplectic about that or not, or if they're being cool about it. I have no idea.
Of course. No fans are cool about anything, Arden.
The Mets are a fascinating team, man. I like
they?
watching the Mets. They're very interesting.
Their pitching is unreal. Like anyways, I'm gonna get crap from the listeners here if I don't get through some of these.
Sure, sorry. Go ahead.
So this next one I'm asking you because it made me laugh. So I don't know how serious she is here, but she's like, it's Alea in Toronto. Says, hey Arden. So I'm in love with Randall Grishik. My boyfriend says he's not as good as he's playing right now, but I think he's just jealous because he's super hot. Can you settle this for us?
Well, I could do the baseball side of it, certainly. I don't know about the other stuff. Yeah, I mean, look, it's hard to, because we've all seen these streaks from Randall Grichuk
Yes,
before,
we have.
right? You know, it's kind of like the Kevin Pillar thing, right? Like a lot of people were fooled time and time again when Kevin Pillar would go on this like 6-week hot streak and talk about some adjustments that he made and, you know, how much better he was feeling at the plate. And then he just became Kevin Pillar again. So, you know, what encourages me the most about Randall Grichuk has been the cut down in strikeouts that we have seen over time now, you know, like since the beginning of 2020. And I understand we're still not dealing with the biggest sample because it was only a 60-game season, right? So at most we're looking at, I don't know, 90 games by this point, but like the strikeout rate has dipped considerably, and that's big. And that's going to help him a lot because he's always hit the ball really hard and he's always had a ton of power. And, you know, so I think that if he's cutting down on the swing and miss in a big way, like that is an indicator that there's a real adjustment that has occurred there. And I think there will be slumps, obviously, like all, you know, we call some players streaky, but really all players are streaky. Like there are like 5 dudes in this game who are actually just consistent across the board. We were just talking about Lindor, right? Like, does anybody believe Lindor is going to carry this 500 OPS forward? No, but he's in a slump for the first month of the year, right? So all players have their hot streaks and their slumps, and then in the end, after 162, they kind of look like themselves. So I think there will be streaks and slumps for him as well. But if he maintains that adjustment he made and striking out less, swinging and missing less, chasing less, that can lead to some pretty good results.
Okay, last question, Arden. Again, thank you so much for your time here. This one is from Jared in Rimbey, Alberta. And he says, where do you see this team in the standings once they are healthy?
I don't know if they're ever going to be fully.
Oh, no.
Come on. Really?
Yeah.
Right? Like, what, you know, why would they be in this year of all years? Right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think there's ever going to be this day where it's like everybody's good to go. I think there's always going to be somebody on the IL, and there's always going to be somebody who's playing through a quad issue and has to DH. Like, I think there's always going to be somebody who, you know, has a glute issue and needs an extra day or two in between outings. You know, like I think there's just always going to be that. So that's why, like, you know, the depth of your 40-man, as we were talking about earlier in the podcast, is so important. The Blue Jays have used 35 players this year, you know, from a 40-man roster, you know, and I guess 41 Throark was DFA'd, and then Reese McGuire and Breivik Valera were also DFA'd. So, you know, out of like a pool of 43, they've used 35. And it's wild, man.
Back to 162, eh? It's funny because like if this was last year, we're almost at the halfway point of the season.
Yeah, no, exactly, right? So I just don't think that, you know, they're ever going to be fully healthy, but that's why the depth of the 40-man helps. And that's why like being able to call on guys like a Joel Payamps and an Anthony Castro who can step in and, you know, get you outs in really big spots is huge, right? That's why Josh Palacios coming up and, you know, not being a zero offensively and defensively was huge, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, that's why
friend of the show, Josh Palacios. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. He was like an everyday player for a stretch there, and he did.
Well, it was so funny. We talked to him just under a week into the season when he had just been assigned to the alt site, and he said all the right things, obviously. But he had such a good spring. You were just rooting for him, and to watch him get called up and actually put up the numbers he did, turn the heads he did, awesome.
Yeah. So that's why, it matters that, look, Rowdy Tellez is not on this team right now, but the Blue Jays believe a lot in his bat. And we've all seen what he can do, like when he is, within himself at the plate and confident and on a run. So if there is a point where like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. needs to miss a couple of weeks because he took a pitch off the knee or something like that, Rowdy Tellez can step in at first base and nobody's going to replace Vlad's production, but put up strong, solid, above replacement level production. That's great. Like that's huge, right? If you get to a point where who's logging big outs in this bullpen, like Jordan Romano has to miss a little bit of time, Rafael Delis has to miss a little bit of time, well, maybe Julian Merriweather is ready to return at that point, and he can step in and get you some big outs. We saw Anthony Castro do it. Maybe Patrick Murphy is healthy midway through the year and he's able to step in to that bullpen. This is why
dude could ever stay healthy. I feel so bad for Patrick Murphy. Like that's a guy who's just every year on the injured list. Like
pitchers get hurt, man.
Yeah.
Every pitcher is somewhere on the spectrum of hurt. To some degree, they are injured and they're pitching through something. And it's just like, how much can you withstand and how much pain threshold do you have? Like, what can you get through? And everybody's on that sort of spectrum. But I agree with you. Like, Patrick Murphy's got amazing stuff.
Such great stuff.
Wipe out stuff. The Blue Jays have been committed to him as a starter. I wonder if he doesn't end up just being a reliever, considering some of the, injury history that he's had. And like I said before, you want to exhaust all options as a starter.
Of course.
But he could be a real weapon out of that bullpen. So like maybe he's, healthy come June and July and he's stepping in because, Trent Thornton's hitting the DL or whatever, or the IL, excuse me. So, it's really just about the depth of your 40. And like, that's why the Blue Jays have done all this work in the last 4 or 5 years to improve the depth of their 40 and to improve their depth organizationally and have more, young talent coming up that can be above replacement level. Like that's what the Dodgers do so well. That's what the Rays have done so well for years, is that the players they bring in when somebody at the big leagues gets hurt or underperforms are above replacement level and are providing wins and are, giving you value. And are being a positive instead of a negative. I mean, that's really how you win over 162.
And the Jays are there. It's an exciting time to be a Toronto Blue Jays fan. They're on their way there anyways.
They're on their way there.
Honestly, Arden, thank you so much for taking the time, my man. Really appreciate it. And thank you.
Happy to do it. Next time I won't force you to reschedule 15 times, I promise.
Well, just appreciate you taking the time.
Before we let you go, I do have one last question that's been kind of bugging at me. Where do you see Cavan Biggio fitting in with this team long term?
I think his best utility, not to use this word twice, is as a utility player.
The Ben Zobrist.
Marwin Gonzalez in his hay. You know, like that's that. If Cavan Biggio is going to get on base at like a 360, 370 clip, cool. I don't really care if you struggle against velocity at that point. You're not making outs. You're getting on base and nobody's asking you to be the leadoff guy. I know he has been at times this year, but the Blue Jays, I think, in their ideal world, Cavan Biggio is hitting like 7th or 8th or even 9th. Having that type of on base presence at the bottom of the lineup for a guy who on Tuesday is playing second base, on Wednesdays in right field, on Thursdays not in the lineup, and then on Fridays at third.
Just giving everybody an off day.
Yeah. Awesome. So as an everyday third baseman right now, like he's just filling a gap on this team, really, because the Blue Jays don't have somebody else there. At some point, I would imagine Jordan Groshans is going to get the opportunity there, or Austin Martin even. And at that point, I think Cavan Biggio just becomes more of a super utility guy who plays a bunch of different positions. It's really useful to have a guy who can play all those spots, get on base at a really high clip, and be like a great clubhouse guy and a true leader in your room. That's really valuable, I think, on a winning team.
Love it.
Awesome. Thanks, Arden.